Moving into the high-rise condo had felt like a dream at first. Kevin, my husband, and I were both excited to live in such a luxurious place. It was offered to us by my father, who generously allowed us to live rent-free. Kevin had always been insecure about his modest salary, but I never minded that. As a bank employee, I earned a stable income, and I was happy to support our life together. We settled into the condo quickly, enjoying the spacious rooms and the incredible view. But soon, little cracks began to form. It started with Kevin's sister, Anna, wanting to visit. I didn't think much of it at the time, though I barely knew her. But her visit marked the beginning of something I never could have anticipated. She showed up dressed head to toe in expensive branded clothes and made snide remarks about the condo, as if I didn't belong there. I brushed it off, but her words left a bitter taste. It wasn't long before Anna's visits became more frequent, and soon she wasn't coming alone. One afternoon, she barged in with our mother-in-law in tow. They acted as if they owned the place, moving freely through our home, rearranging things without asking. I felt like a guest in my own house. To make things worse, they had a spare key, which I hadn't even known about. Apparently, Kevin had given it to them without telling me. I felt a cold knot of dread in my stomach as I realized they were taking over our lives. When I confronted Kevin, asking why he hadn't told me about the key, he shrugged it off. "What's the big deal?" he said. "They're family." But to me, it felt like an invasion. The condo, once a symbol of a promising future, was becoming a prison where I had no control. I pleaded with Kevin to set boundaries, but he wouldn't listen. My frustration grew with every passing day. As the days went by, my mother-in-law and Anna made themselves more at home. They helped themselves to the food in the fridge, moved our furniture, and treated the condo as if it were theirs. I was at my breaking point. I came home from work one evening to find them both lounging on the couch, laughing as though everything was perfectly normal. I couldn't take it anymore. I turned to Kevin and demanded that he put a stop to this. But instead of supporting me, he sided with them. "You're making a big deal out of nothing," he said, his voice cold and dismissive. His words cut deep. Kevin, who had once been kind and considerate, was now completely under their control. He had always struggled with self-confidence, but now it seemed he was relying on his family's approval at the cost of our marriage. I felt isolated and powerless, trapped in a situation I couldn't change. My marriage was slipping through my fingers, and Kevin was slipping away with it. One day, everything came to a head. I returned home from work to find the house in chaos. Boxes were stacked everywhere, and my mother-in-law was directing movers like she owned the place. "What's going on?" I demanded, my heart pounding. She looked at me as if I was being ridiculous. "This is going to be our home now," she said casually. "The rest of our things are arriving today." I stood there, frozen in shock. They were moving in, without even asking me, without any discussion. I felt the room spin around me as panic set in. I immediately went to Kevin, hoping he would finally stand up for us. But when I told him what was happening, he just laughed. "Oh yeah, that's today," he said, as if it were no big deal. "Didn't I mention it?" His nonchalance was unbearable. "You can't be serious," I said, my voice trembling. "How can you let them take over like this?" But Kevin didn't seem to care. He laughed it off, completely oblivious to the nightmare he was allowing to unfold. That evening, things took an even darker turn. As we sat down for dinner, Kevin looked at me with an unsettling grin. "We should celebrate," he said. "It's not every day your family moves in with you." I stared at him in disbelief. My frustration boiled over, and I couldn't hold back any longer. "We can't just let this happen," I shouted. "This place is ours, thanks to my father. You can't just hand it over to them." Kevin's smile vanished, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something darker in his eyes. "What are you talking about?" he snapped. "This isn't just your place. We're married, remember?" The room fell silent as he stood up, his voice growing angrier. "You think you're better than me because you make more money? Because your dad gave us this condo?" His words cut deep, and I felt my heart sink. This wasn't the man I had married. He had changed, and it was clear he was no longer on my side. The confrontation escalated. Kevin's mother and Anna joined in, laughing at my attempts to stand up for myself. They were mocking me, treating me like an outsider in my own home. My mother-in-law, with a sneer, tossed an envelope onto the table. "If you hate living with us so much, why don't you just leave?" she said. "There's $10,000 in there. Consider it severance money." I stared at the envelope in disbelief. They were trying to buy me out, to kick me out of my own life. My anger reached a boiling point, but in that moment, something shifted inside me. I realized I didn't have to put up with this any longer. They thought they were in control, but they didn't know the full story. The condo wasn't even technically theirs to take over. It was in my name, a gift from my father. And suddenly, I saw an opportunity. "Fine," I said, grabbing the envelope. "I'll leave." I packed my bags and walked out, but inside, I was already planning my revenge. After leaving, I went straight to my parents' house. My father, always calm and supportive, listened as I told him everything that had happened. His face darkened with anger as I explained how Kevin and his family had taken over the condo. "We'll get them out of there," he said firmly. But I had a better plan. "Wait," I said, a smile forming on my lips. "I have an idea." I explained my plan to my father, and he agreed to help me. We were going to let them think they had won, at least for now. I contacted Kevin the next day and told him that I was transferring ownership of the condo to him. He was overjoyed, thinking he had finally secured the place for his family. What he didn't realize was that with ownership came responsibility, including paying the rent, which had been covered by my father until now. Kevin, oblivious to the real cost of living there, eagerly accepted the transfer. A month later, Kevin called me in a panic. "What's going on?" he shouted over the phone. "We just got a bill for $6,000 in rent." I couldn't help but laugh. "Did you really think you could live there for free forever?" I asked. "That was only because I was living there. Now that you've taken over, you're responsible for the rent." Kevin was furious. His family had assumed they could live rent-free in luxury, but reality was starting to sink in. I could hear the desperation in his voice as he tried to argue with me, but there was nothing he could do. The condo was no longer under my father's protection, and they had no way of affording the rent. Their greed had blinded them, and now they were paying the price. My mother-in-law got on the phone next, trying to guilt me into helping them, but I wasn't going to back down. "You tried to manipulate me," I said coldly. "Now you can deal with the consequences." The situation for Kevin and his family quickly spiraled out of control. They were drowning in bills they couldn't pay, and the pressure was mounting. But the worst was yet to come. A few weeks later, I discovered that Anna had been using my credit card without my permission. She had racked up thousands of dollars in charges, buying designer clothes and luxury items. Furious, I hired a lawyer and began preparing a lawsuit to demand repayment. When I confronted Anna about the theft, she tried to downplay it. "It's just a little shopping," she said, laughing. "Don't be so dramatic." But this was no small matter. It was theft, plain and simple, and I wasn't going to let her get away with it. My lawyer sent a formal demand for repayment, and soon the full weight of their actions began to hit them. Kevin's family was cornered, with no way out. Desperate, my mother-in-law called me, crying and begging for help. "We can't afford to pay all this," she sobbed. "We'll lose everything." But I wasn't moved by her tears. They had brought this on themselves, and I wasn't going to bail them out. "You tried to kick me out of my own home," I reminded her. "Now you have to deal with the consequences." My mother-in-law's pleas fell on deaf ears. They had burned every bridge with me, and now they were reaping what they had sown. It wasn't long before they had to move out of the condo. Without any money to pay the rent, they were forced to return to their old, dilapidated family home. Their life of luxury had crumbled around them, and they had no one to blame but themselves. The high-rise condo, once a symbol of their greed, was now empty. Meanwhile, my life was finally looking up. With Kevin and his family out of the picture, I returned to the high-rise condo, free from their influence. My father made sure I didn't have to pay rent, and I could finally breathe easy in the space that had once felt like a prison. I focused on my career, and soon I was offered a promotion at the bank. It was the first time in months that I felt truly happy and in control of my life. The nightmare with Kevin and his family was over, and I was ready to move on. But I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction knowing that they were now struggling to get by. They had tried to manipulate me, to take everything I had, but in the end, they were the ones who lost. Their greed had been their downfall. One day, I received a call from Kevin. His voice was filled with desperation. "Sarah, please," he begged. "We've lost everything. Can't you help us?" I listened in silence as he pleaded for forgiveness, but I felt nothing. He had chosen his family over me, and now he was paying the price. "I'm sorry, Kevin," I said, my voice steady. "But you made your choice." I hung up the phone, feeling a sense of closure. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. My life was my own again, and I was determined to live it on my terms. I had learned a valuable lesson. Never let anyone take advantage of your kindness. Kevin and his family thought they could control me, but in the end, they were the ones who lost everything. And as I looked out from the window of my high-rise condo, I smiled, knowing that I had